Just take one hit. Don't you want to be cool?
Gather round everyone. The show's about to begin.
Turn on, tune in, drop out, this show's amazing. It's Super Lemon Haze, you know them boys always blazing. Put one in the air, fill your glass and get to raising. Kirkman praising, school flag waving. Chopping up the topics instead of choking on some chronic. Scott and Eric breaking it down like 21st century prophets. Eyes glazed and minds dazed, it's knowledge they convey. Roll up and consume the Super Lemon Haze.
Super Lemon Haze.
Going to ask you several questions.
Super Lemon Haze.
How do you feel?
I feel like a slice of butter melting on top of a big old pile of flapjacks. Yeah.
So we, the other guests we obviously have on the show, some of you might know, some might not know. I was on their show recently. I got a correction about their show. They made note of that. I have to make sure I get it right. But the show is called the Super Lemon Haze Podcast. It's on YouTube. It's on the Kirk Minahan YouTube channel. They're a Kirk Minahan fan show. I said that they were affiliated with Barstool Sports or Barstool Sports Show. Apparently they're not. But, Kirk is on Barstool Sports, so there is some sort of affiliation. But
it's like 5 degrees of separation.
Yeah, a little bit in the network,
Yeah. You guys don't you're very humble. You don't want to trade on what's not 100% official. Is that correct?
Maybe not. More like not get ourselves in trouble, Mike.
We're having a great time, and that's all that matters. So that's.
And we should make sure they got your names. It's Eric, which on the right, and Scott on the left.
You got it.
That's it.
All right. And Scott, you're also the doctor, right?
I'm. I am the cannabis doctor, the unofficial cannabis doctor. Yes, sir.
He's got.
I like
PhD.
how you make that. Make sure everyone's aware it's unofficial because we have some. I don't know if you've seen some of the cretins in this movement, but
no.
We have some fake doctors that dress up in the medical gear and then they find worms in their grow or whatever.
We try our best to poke fun and keep a good satire on things, but also I find myself just giving some advice and doing a little bit of consulting and helping people get into it. Obviously with the rush of people trying to test things out and different products and different things out there, I find myself helping some folks out. And actually, that's kind of what got us going with me and Eric originally. So, yeah.
And I've read some of your recommendations. I like the unofficial doctor because I think you give better advice than the fake people we talked about, the fake doctors, but as well as like the real doctors. A lot of times the real doctors don't know anything really about what they're recommending.
I'm like you, Mike. I'm pure inspiration. I just kind of spit the ideas out. Eric keeps me in line, puts all the warning stamps, and kind of keeps me from getting myself into trouble, like I said before.
Do you have a PhD?
Absolutely not. Grant.
Oh, okay. I was studying for my graduate degree when I fell disabled. That's why I was going to ask, but I understand.
No.
See, a lot of education, a lot of work experience.
I don't want to go disrespecting people with any kind of education grant. So, see, here you go.
Not a worry.
I let Eric take over now. Now Eric starts.
I cover the two of us with all the degrees. So all the letters next to my name. We're good.
Oh, you went to graduate school?
I have, but I haven't gone through the PhD or PsyD program, but that was always the plan. I actually was applying for a doctor program this fall, and because I was not extremely happy with where I was working, so I was just starting to look around, and graduate school programs kind of came up in my brain. And then I got a job offer that was just one of those I can't refuse, and so I actually took away my I withdrew my application. So. We'll see. Maybe next year.
And I really do like the recommendations. So I've read some of them. Recommend strains and things like that.
Yeah,
Mike. Yeah, thank you, sir.
We got a cool thing. So not only are we doing the podcast, but about 4 or 5 weeks ago, Scott and I were thinking, why don't we just, because we kept getting like DMs questions about, what do you think about this or what about that or about these bad cartridges that are on the market. A lot of like the stuff else on the black market.
Yeah, questions about gummies, edibles, all sorts of different things. So, and it's similar to what, again, like I said, I do with my friends and kind of on the side. So, it made sense. And
so Scott started writing some stories, and I'm like, I've got a really good friend who's an illustrator. So I'm like, this is just, just almost like a little bit of a cartoon, but some serious talk in it. So every week we're posting, we're calling it like Weed Life. I mean, whatever. But it's just a profile, a patient profile of a person who's kind of describing what they're going through, some symptoms, some thought processes, and then Scott's writing all of these 100%.
Not trying to stereotype necessarily, but definitely I find groups of different kinds of users and different kinds of consumers of cannabis, whether it be different edibles or different strains that people like, and different things that people react to for their lifestyles or however their brains are constructed or whatever's going on. So trying to cover different kind of backgrounds and different kind of people that are like in different flavors and different things. Yeah.
Education.
And then after, exactly.
Yeah. And then
education. That's what's the biggest thing in cannabis is education.
Yeah.
My hope is somebody reads it. My hope is somebody reads it, identifies, oh, that's what I do. That's what I'm interested in. And maybe they get a little bit of a thought or an idea out of it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Awesome. So again, it's Eric and Scott from the Super Lemon Haze podcast that you can find on the Kirk Minihane YouTube channel. Usually preparing on the premiering on weekends, usually like Sunday nights or even like earlier in the weekend. You had an episode we were all kind of geared up to watch. We were excited that you were going to interview someone from Revolutionary Clinics.
Yeah.
I have my own story about running into people from Revolutionary Clinics this weekend. I may have to share in the show, but we'll see about that. But you guys did we don't really care about that as much. What we care about is that you guys had a big show.
Yeah.
We were all geared up for it. It premiered and then it came down. Right?
That's exactly what happened.
And we have no idea. We brought you on. We're like kind of crap, and we're like, are these guys going to punk us? Like, because you haven't told us anything. We have
no, we would never do that.
Much in the, we don't know.
Well, so
I believe there was a screenshot up too. So I mean, it's there.
We had
it's
it.
Legit. We were ready to go. We had
so I just want to say that, the unique thing about our show and kind of our stance that, we don't come from any one background, right? So we're not like pure activists, or we're not like just pure like, public health professionals, or on the policy side or on the politics side. So we kind of covered everything. And I think just in the last couple of months, just because of our kind of like even keel, like Switzerland kind of, or, sort of take on things, we've gotten some great discussions and great interviews, and Mike was one of them. And so just through another little bit of a channel, Mike, I really was listening to our conversation over and over again. I kept thinking about all of the stuff that you thought or think that's going on behind the scenes, a lot of the health consequences, and a lot of the employees that were, speaking to you and kind of taking a lot of risk, for their future careers or lives by, exploiting some of the things they witnessed. And so I wanted to take that information and try to bring someone from the corporate side and see what they had to say. So I was actually working on getting two different individuals, one from Rev Clinic come on, and the other one was from another major one, not Netta. I don't think Netta's going to talk to anybody, to be honest, just because there's so much shit going on, especially with that investigation that you're looking into. So, so we landed the CMO from Rev Clinics. And again, I unfortunately, I was able to do some information digging online, but the majority of stuff that I know about that company is from our conversation and a lot of stuff that you've been posting, Mike, which is fine, obviously, but like, coming at it from sort of like that even keel, I definitely felt, after I've listened to it a couple times and after I sent it in and I submitted the episode to be played, I felt that I may have been leaning a little bit into one direction. And Scott was sort of mentioning this to me too at the end. He's like, dude, you sounded a lot like Mike Crawford in there. He's like, you had some like investigative spirit going on that's a little bit different than what we've seen in the last like 4 or 5 months. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. And not that it wasn't. I thought it was a well-rounded interview. I mean, we covered a lot of topics, but I think that he sat down thinking it might have been a little bit of a cream puff interview. And Eric came at him on some pretty interesting topics and conversations and hit him probably pretty hard that he probably wasn't exactly prepared for. I mean, I think he was kind of, hanging on his back deck, and it was kind of the evening. He's having a glass of wine, I think. And it was a little bit more of a chill scene. And again, I think it was a great conversation, but you were firing on him, and you had some good stuff. I mean,
the Mike, and this is actually a question I have for you, is that like, how do you set up people that come on your show? And I guess one of the things that you've been in this business, and Grant, you as well, you've been doing this for a long time. So it's almost like when people come on your show, they kind of know what the flavors and what to expect. I feel like, is that true? Do you think?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, not way back, but now I think.
Yeah.
Well, even back when Jason Lewis first came on, people who come to the Young Jurks know that if you're coming on the Young Jurks, you're coming to talk about policy and
Yeah.
your past history. And so most people who come on know that they need to be well versed in the topic, but at the same time, they also know that we're probably going to have done a decent amount of research on them. However, there are also some people who come on for causes that we support, where we very much do an interview that allows them to get their voice out there because we feel it's being strategically suppressed by the same type of corporate or government forces we would normally interview with a higher degree of scrutiny.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you see me looking down a lot today, it's because I have my dog in here and I keep feeding him chicken to shut him up.
I just thought it was Grant was saying such important things. You're like, he's the
So
man.
that's the key, Mike. So from now on, I know when when the dogs are barking, it's because there's a lack of chicken going on. All right, now I know the deal.
I just went to Market Basket, got
All right.
like the whole rotisserie chicken, you know.
If the supplies are low, the dogs are barking. Now I know from moving forward when I'm listening from the future.
He's got he's Whitey Bulger over here. He's got an extortion thing going.
But that's why those folks from Revolutionary Clinics would not come on to the Young Jurks. I don't think we would invite them.
Maybe. We don't want to rule that out yet because.
Yeah, let me, because I actually, Mike, to be honest, your name came up. Your name came up, and obviously, I think because a person comes on our show, they want to maybe look into a little bit of our past. And you were the last guest that we had, and so I think, he totally knew who you were, and I think you actually even have a video of him walking out with the CEO. Wasn't that like when you put
that was him. It's
right
funny because I thought it was somebody else. I thought
it was
the attorney. I thought he was
Tom.
the attorney.
It was,
it was him.
I happened to look into some of that stuff because I wanted to get up on as much as I knew from your stuff and from else. And I was like, oh my God, that's the guy that's we're having on. Anyway, so we got him on, but what I was trying to say is I set him up not in a way that was dishonest, but I'm like, hey, we're gonna, we want to talk about these topics. It wasn't like anything in any direction we went wasn't what I already sort of, proposed. And so I think what happened was we got into a great conversation. It was very, very relaxed, as Scott was saying. We're all drinking, we're all sipping, we're all smoking. It's like, and then it went on for like over an hour. And this is kind of the story where like I got off. He called me out for being a little bit too investigative, but I said, okay, whatever. I'll re-listen to it. The next morning, I'm, producing the whole thing, which is basically just listening to it over again, making sure there's nothing in there that I need to mark out. And I'm like, dude, this is like one of the best open and honest conversations that I think we've ever had, especially with someone who's heavily involved in a topic that, we've only recently started to get ourselves into, but he's like a big time player in one of these big time companies in the state. And so I was like, all right, man, I'm so excited to get this online. And so I sent it to, Kirk's people who put it on the YouTube channel, and it's all set to go. And then I get this like firestorm of email, text, call, missed call, like 100 things. And I don't know if you guys do this, but do you guys, you're doing this live with us right now, but do you guys ever produce a show, record it? And does anyone ever ask to listen to or to watch it before you post or produce it? Or how does that work with you guys?
We're live. So
you're live.
no turning
and
back.
that's exactly why we would not do that.
That's a very
But we have had
interesting
people afterwards complain and ask us to take it down and threaten to sue us. That has happened. I told them
right.
not doing that.
I'm
not going to say I've never taken a show down because I have.
Yeah. Okay. And what were those reasons?
Way back,
Yeah. But for what was the concern? I want to see if you shared some of them. So you were just heavily critical about your performance.
About doing this too. Sometimes, whether it's live or recorded, sometimes you listen back and be like, do I really, I feel you on this. I get where you're coming from because you guys are new to this, like in a lot of ways, especially diving into something and, it's a little uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, and
our listeners though do have a pretty good understanding of Rev Clinics dating back to the initial Cambridge equity proposal, dating back to their argument that they should be allowed to be in that equity period, dating back to the boycott of Revolutionary Clinics after they announced their lawsuit to try to sue over that equity period. So thankfully the listeners are going to be pretty caught up as to what we're talking about, but just for that context, Revolutionary Clinics, along with a few other medical dispensaries in Cambridge, did not want Cambridge to pass a cannabis business permitting ordinance that contained a 2-year period for state certified economic empowerment applicants, those being companies that will directly help those most harmed by the war on drugs. And as a result, they tried to create a fund overseen by themselves that would benefit 5 to 7 applicants and allow them access to that priority period. Well, public policy groups and other EE applicants saw that and said, why would a priority period meant for EEs include medical dispensaries that are almost 100% white owned? And so that's what happened.
Big
and
money owned. Let's be clear too. It's not working class white guys. This is major, major money.
So they passed that priority period in September of 2019, and the Revolutionary Clinics dispensary went on to sue the city of Cambridge. And to get folks caught up, initially in January, a preliminary injunction was issued in the case, and the priority period was put on hold. That preliminary injunction on April 24th of 2019 was overturned by a single justice of the Massachusetts Appeals Court. And by overturning that injunction, the priority period was once again allowed to go into effect, which is the state of affairs now. So that is the full context there. That is why folks are angry at Revolutionary Clinics, and that was the context of the history there.
There's one point that Revolutionary Clinics makes. I ran into some reps from Revolutionary Clinics this weekend and actually did get some answers. I don't know if they were on the record or off the record, honestly, he didn't say, but one of the things they mentioned about that lawsuit is that it got kicked back to the original court, the original judge who ruled, who gave them the ruling they wanted initially. So they feel like pretty good about the lawsuit, actually, even though they lost the last round.
Let me jump in quickly because I've read the full briefs in the case, and so yes, they got an interesting sentence from the single justice who kicked back the injunction after overturning it, which said this is a ruling on a specific issue. The issue was whether or not Cambridge's ordinance was in conflict with a regulatory schema the CCC has for dual licensing priority. So the judge ruled that that was not the case, but also said that the district court judge could reissue the injunction on other grounds. But why they shouldn't be too happy about that is there is a 2-pronged test for determining whether or not an injunction issues. One is you have to show that you're more likely than not to win on the merits of the argument, which is like we were talking about, there's a litany of different arguments they have. But 2, you have to be able to show the court evidence of irreparable economic harm. And that's what they don't talk about, because in that ruling kicking down the injunction, the single justice said specifically that the evidence of economic harm was scant. So they actually have to meet 2 thresholds. They have to, 1, find another issue to get the injunction issued on, and then beef up their economic harm argument enough to the point where the SJC will, the First Circuit, or the single justice of the appeals court will sustain it. And I also want to make one more point, which is that fundamentally Rev Clinics argues that the legal reason they can participate in that priority period for those most harmed by the drug war is a portion of state law that says that municipal ordinances cannot prevent co-located medical dispensaries from opening as an adult use establishment. But that says nothing about whether or not cities and towns can delay a co-located MCC from opening as an adult use. So fundamentally, I think they're going to keep trying to get these injunctions, but I think the case turns on a weak legal argument and the city of Cambridge will prevail.
All right. Thank you, Grant.
I think it's also, just to add a little bit of detail to that, I think it's important to note that the process by which the Cannabis Control Commission does select EE or MTC applicants, and and that's what they were arguing, correct? Grant, they were basically saying they were not in line with it because Cambridge was saying no MTC companies or applicants whatsoever because we're going to give a 2-year head start for the EEs. But the way that the Cannabis Control Commission, and correct me if I'm wrong, is they go to the EEs. If there's not an applicant ready, they go right back across the aisle. If there's an applicant ready, they go ahead with that one. Then they go back. If there's an applicant ready, if there isn't on EE, they go back to MTC. Yeah. It just goes back and forth like that, correct?
Yeah, but do you know what the ratio of RMD priority?
That's like 193 to like 10 or something
9.
Like that. Yeah.
And so when the judge and the single justice made a hilariously sardonic comment, And you have to know how to read judicial decisions to see this stuff because they don't say it explicitly. But the single justice said something along the lines where the dispensary's argument here might hold water if they could show that there was a imbalance of economic empowerment to approved RMD applications, period. That is clearly not the case, period. So basically what the judge said was, you're trying to tell me that this city can't only allow EEs when there's a huge imbalance for RMDs, and he laughed them out of the courtroom.
So we're talking to Eric and Scott again from Super Lemon Haze podcast on the Kirk Minihane YouTube channel, YouTube network. They're a Kirk Minihane fan show. So, they talk a lot about cannabis. They just had an interview with, what's his name? Tom Schneider? No, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, Tom Schneider, Revolutionary Clinics. He's with management over there. And you got rid of the podcast, and we started talking about some of that. I guess
I just want to ask Grant a question real quick. I apologize. I'll get back to that.
No problem.
Grant, we're in the perfect world because, and I understand there's a huge imbalance, and I absolutely believe in the feeling that we are completely overrun in terms of the cannabis industry by rich white people. I mean, that's just the way it is. And obviously we're overlapping with a lot of shit that's going on right now in current events that also just makes it a little bit more obvious. So what's the perfect formula then? How does it work? Because I mean, the one thing, and I'll be honest, the interview that we had with Tom was, it was almost like impeccable. Like the questions that were asked by Scott and I, balance. His replies, perfect. I did not leave that conversation hitting the guy. I actually left the conversation saying, dude, let's get together, let's drink a beer, let's fucking like smoke weed together. Like it was like the most love I felt. And Mike, you're gonna have to take this into consideration, but our interview was great. But this one was like, I think he just like opened up, and it made me feel, again, first interview, completely different perspective than you guys, but first interview with corporate cannabis America. And it made us understand.
Understanding, I think, was the best.
Yeah, there's sides to all of this.
Some understanding of their approach and their situation.
Yeah.
Do you expect them to come on and say this would cost us money and therefore we opposed it?
You know what? But are you talking about the lawsuit?
Yeah, but no, you were going to ask.
Yes, I guess what I'm trying to say is, and I'm sorry, Grant. The overall so he and I knew about it, but he explained it in detail. The sort of what's it called, the virtual funding, or what's the vertical
integration.
Oh, vertical
integration.
Yeah.
Just going through all of the steps for medical, not for recreational, of course, but for medical, you have to have the retail store, you have to have the grow, you have to have the process. Like you own the whole like triple layers of it.
You also used to have to be a nonprofit.
But that's a key. The whole thing started. Like when medical started, no one was talking about any of these issues, like economic empowerment. That wasn't existing. So they were just, like most things in Massachusetts, who's got the most money? Those are the people we trust.
So the problem is with the economic.
You're talking about verticalization.
Yeah.
Like that exists now in the medical, and a lot of these big legal are the same way because they were already set up that way for medical. But what we're doing and what the latest changes are going to be is de-verticalizing. So there's going to be opportunities for people just to grow. There's going to be opportunities for people just to make, lollipops. You know what I mean? Like there's different licenses, cultivation, manufacturing, and then micro licenses, SE delivery only. Like, so basically what we're doing is we're breaking it up. Like it's like, remember AT&T was like this big cartel? And then they sell off parts and made like 10 other new awesome companies.
Mondell, right? Yeah.
Right? So that's what's going on basically. And there's different ways you can do that. There's 8 million different ways you can, the worst way is just to break up a company and say you have to sell off your parts. We're not doing that. We're just saying, in certain markets, especially like a big city like Cambridge that has all this money, it's a place that everyone wants to be. MIT, Harvard, that's where the money is. So for them just to say, we're going to give an opportunity for 2 years for the smaller guys to catch up, to try to plant a seed is, kind of the idea on that anyways. But ideally, unfortunately, and I say I'm talking about the cannabis reform community, in general, Shalene Title, Grant Smith, you could name 100 people. We had 100 people we nominated on our little poll we just did. And so, basically we have to go to a piecemeal approach. We have to go on there every year, make it a little better, add something else. And that's how we're
Right.
kind of chipping away at it, right, Grant? You want to add
Well,
in
yeah,
on that?
and what I didn't want to take away from the point you were making earlier, which was you asked, so if the solution isn't that fund that they proposed in Cambridge, because that was not a good solution, a voluntary dispensary overseen fund that they misled the city council about in a September 5th, 2019 letter where they said they had signed an agreement with the Central Square Business Improvement District to oversee their fund, only for 3 days later on September 8th for the bid to send a letter to the city council that I still have saying that they had never entered into an agreement to oversee the fund. So that's not the solution, in my opinion. My solution is a three-pronged approach that directly addresses why we have got to the point where there's this fundamental imbalance in the licensing between these rich white medical companies and economic empowerment and social equity applicants. Number one, Senate Bill 2650 in Massachusetts. That is the Social Equity Loan Fund. The biggest problem facing applicants in equity, economic empowerment, social equity, micro businesses, disadvantaged business enterprises.
They can't get loans.
Right now is that they collapse.
Yeah.
And they collapse because the licensing process takes so long in the municipal level at the CCC. And so when they get desperate, they have to go to vulture capitalists who look at them as an opportunity to undermine license limits and things like that. So the State Social Equity Loan Fund would provide no interest loans to EE and SE applicants that they could then pay back to help the fund sustain itself in perpetuity to prevent that barrier from existing. Number two, to address the second issue that we were talking about a little earlier, mandatory municipal equity priority periods. There's currently no requirement that local cities and towns, when issuing HCAs, do so in a way that reflects the kind of commitment to equity that the CCC has to do in law. So that's the second change. The third change specifically is...
Is this part of your application, Mike, by the way?
What's that?
Well,
Is this part of your application?
I don't know. What's it, Grant? I'm trying to remember. We added so much stuff in there. What did we leave in and put in?
Well, let me get to the third part.
What's the third point?
Ties it all together, which is that, as Mike was talking about, dating back to 2012, there has never once been an social equity or economic empowerment program for licensing in the medical arena. So I want, for a period of 3 to 5 years, were the bill to de-verticalize medical licenses, which is H4523, to pass, I would want to see for 3 to 5 years those licenses going exclusively to economic empowerment and social equity applicants. Those three things together will fix that imbalance, in my opinion.
And de-verticalize, which is the key. Right. Like to allow a lot of people get in on their skill or specialty. If they just want to be an edible maker, let them do edibles. They don't have to grow it and sell it. They just make them. So we're with Eric and Scott from Super Lemon Haze podcast. I want to ask more questions about this interview and kind of give out some information too, because I think what I like about Grant is he's sticking to like the main Cambridge.
Oh man, he's got that's a lot of information.
Grant's doing it right now. I love it.
Hopefully he'll write a book one day that I'll read. You got to type that shit out.
Follow him on Facebook. He gives it to you for free.
I will definitely be re-looking at this so that I catch everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Reprocess all of what Grant.
So Grant just solved the problems of the universe. Actually,
he's my secret weapon over here.
He just solved pi.
Think about it again, Grant. Thank
you guys are going to give me a big head.
I think you're making him blush for the first time. Oh my God, this is.
Oh wow, first time,
he's blushing. Look at him.
There we go.
Grant, I sent you a Christmas card too in the mail.
I'm sure you know how to make. Yeah, I'm sure you know how to make him blush, Mike, with those Christmas cards.
I did. I sent him a Christmas card. I'll make sure you get that this week. I'm serious.
I celebrate Christmas in June. So.
Yeah. So we're talking to Eric and Scott from the Super Lemon Haze podcast and Revolutionary Clicks. The stuff, kind of the more salacious stuff that I was reporting about them, and I didn't put out a story yet. Because sometimes you get these little nuggets of information you don't really know.
Yeah.
Like that's
your stories between the two major players in corporate cannabis, Netta and probably Rev Clinics, right?
Yeah, Netta I actually did stories on because that
Netta,
stuff is so black and white. You know what I mean?
But that's more about that's health, right? That's about the employees complaining about health. What you were talking about was more like the controversy of like
kind of
maybe they're working at the dirt of getting up, buying other
stuff related to employees, but a lot of times I'll put that stuff out on the Facebook or even talk about it on the podcast because I know it's factual, but I don't really know where it's going to go. That's why I haven't written a story. That's why, we haven't gone and interviewed those guys or even try to strong push, even though I know they wouldn't.
Yeah.
But
So
I
you thought
suspect they might now.
You thought there was some shade in the investing side of it, right?
Yeah, and
that's the question
also
you
on that
asked?
sexual assault allegation situation.
Yeah.
So I ran into this, yesterday. I ran into a couple of Revolutionary Clinics people, folks, employees, one in management, and he actually did tell me some things which I thought were interesting. Gave me a few answers. I'm wondering if you got any answers. But the first thing he said was that Bert, he's the gentleman that had the alleged sexual assault. I believe he was the CFO at the time. He said that he did get fired and that he got fired for the actual sexual assault allegation, incident, whatever we call that. So I thought that was interesting because when I did ambush those two guys on the street, they wouldn't talk about it. So we did seem to get an answer on that.
It's kind of hard to get an answer out of a sexual assault. Like from
it's not something to laugh about either.
I'm not. I believe me, that's not something that I'm laughing about. But I think it's difficult to have a conversation if you just like shove a camera in someone's face and ask them serious questions about sexual assault. Is what I was trying
Definitely.
to say.
Yeah.
I hear him on that. But even afterwards, like what I would have expected is some kind of answer on it. We got answers in other ways at that point. We talked about that as well. But one of the other questions I asked him point blank, I said, well, tell me about the Vinings. Does, David Vining have anything to do with ownership? What about this Chris Vining and this email he's been sending out highlighting Revolutionary Clinics? And he said that they had nothing to do with the Vinings. He said Chris Vining has nothing to do with the Revolutionary Clinics. I said, you should check out the email that he's sending around because it makes it look like you guys are connected. And he seemed very kind of concerned about that. Like he was like, really? So, I'm probably going to reach out to him this week and forward him that email. And, maybe we may have someone from Revolutionary Clinics on our show to kind of.
I would gain a lot of respect for them if they were someone who were willing to come on the show. We will treat them fairly. I mean, I'll definitely have a lot of documents that I'm going to want to go over, but we will treat them fairly.
Exactly.
And, so to be honest, Mike, that's actually that during our conversation when he. We were flowing and we were talking about some of the stuff that was going on. And when he threw out your name, it was around that side. That was actually where I think there was some backpedaling. And again, re-listening to it, I'm like, wow, I think this is also like 40 or 50 minutes getting into it. When you came up, because what I did bring up was that the Patriot, I asked him if he ever watched that Patriot Act Netflix special. It's like 25 minutes by that guy Hassan, right? I think you posted that, right?
Yes, we did. Part of it.
Where they compared big cannabis to the cartel.
That's right.
And again, in a 25-minute, it's not really investigative, but they did obviously introduce, Kobe Evans and those guys. So, I mean, I was happy to see some of that publicity, but, they really painted a really bad picture, which I think is fair, right? And based on what you guys know and what, in the little time that we've been doing this, what we've heard. And I asked him if he watched that, and he didn't have an answer for me. If that makes any sense.
He hadn't seen it?
It was hard to gauge. And then that's where I started leading into the topic about funding. And, it was sort of, I started to see a backpedaling. And then, to be honest, I mean, this is just where it went. It was like, and then I got a little bit more conservative, and then a little bit more conservative, and then he pulled himself back in the box. And then what I was asking you guys in the beginning is because you guys are live, but, I've never been asked to forward our show to anybody who's been on our show. We've had a number of guests, and to preview it before we posted it. And it didn't sound to me like, and this was never going to be this was like an hour before it was supposed to air, because I sent out the link. I tweeted the link. Everyone knew when it was coming out. I actually got reposted about our interview on the Rev Clinics' Instagram story. So it's like everyone knew that this was going to happen.
It was a late request.
Yeah, it was a 7:30. It was going to go live 7:30.
So we had promoted all day.
We'd
done the interview the night
Yeah.
before.
What did you do?
Day,
When they asked that, did you send it to them or did you tell them no?
Well, you know what it was? It was Tom. And I think just, again, this was my weakness, right? So probably as a more mature in this industry kind of thing, because it's the first time that we're getting involved in this, obviously on the level. I think I was just unprepared on how to respond to that, because I wanted to maintain my level of trust and commitment to the guests. And I probably shouldn't have released it. If I was doing this longer, I probably would have said, I'll air it and we'll just deal with it. I watched it. It's fine. There's nothing, but I think I just kind of kowtow to that, and I gave in, and I sent
Good word.
sent the link. I don't know. I mean, I
love
look
how
back and I think that was the problem. That I mean, maybe
being
I'll learn from that.
transparent, though.
I'm
Credit
glad you're
to you.
transparent about it.
It's
That's
an idea that
awesome.
we can keep a bridge built, though. I believe. I believe.
But that was my thing. Once I released it, that was my thought. I was like, did I just give up something that we should hold on to, which is like kind of like freedom? I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, obviously, I understand what you're saying, Grant, about being transparent. But I knew the minute I sent him that link, I'm like, there's no way this is going on air. I'm like, there's no way.
Big difference. Do you feel that you compromised in the situation, or that you compromised yourself in the situation?
Really good point.
I think it's a compromise. We just certainly didn't compromise ourselves because we weren't going to edit it up
and
or chop it up.
One of
the only conversations we had while I was in Maine and away this weekend was, we're not going to bastardize this thing or chop it up or anything like that. Either he goes with it or he doesn't.
Maybe, and that was the
maybe
request.
A minute or two, if there's something like just some weird space or something, just to clean it up a little. But we would never take out questions and conversation. So. At that point, it's a no-go. And then, in the moment, the only other thing I threw out as an idea was keep a bridge built. He still feels like he owes us some conversation.
Yeah, there you go.
Trying to keep that relationship, at least we can keep some kind of a dialogue or a conversation going. I don't know what that's worth for the future or not, but in the moment, that was.
Well, he owes you at this point. You got to say that because, I go with, Chris Ferrone has saved me so many times with the written stories. Not more, because we're live.
That's the editor from The Dig?
Yeah. So I run into the situation when I'm about to put out a story, like in print, because it's the same kind of idea, right? They want to see the story.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, I used to send people, sections or stories.
Mm-hmm.
And he caught wind of that and was like, no, like, don't ever do that. Like, just if they're really hands-on, read it to them. Get them on the phone and read the section. But beyond that, don't go any further than that. Don't give them any control. You own this, so, unless, you're fact checking something, that's a little different when you're asking them. But my advice to you guys for the future is be like, no, we don't do that. We have a policy. We don't do that. We just don't allow it. But, it's up to you. Like, I'm not telling you how you should do it, but that's just for me, it does make sense and it does work, and I totally get where you're coming from because
and the going live thing that's awesome. I mean, like,
you guys could do it. You are more than talented enough to go live, and I can assure you that you will not run into any of those issues if you are live, because just the fact that you are live will weed out the type of people who don't have the heart to do that kind of interview.
It's funny too. Those guys thought they were going on Pro Cannabis Media Network, and they realized they were on the Super 11 Haze, and they were going to have a hard time.
That's your fault, Mike. You got in my head. But I'll be honest, and again, I just want to summarize this. But I asked a lot of the questions that came out of our interview together and some of the follow-up that we've had, and he answered them in a way that I actually think you would have totally understood and appreciated. And I almost think that, like, in the future, if there's ever an ability to have a conversation with anyone from Rev Clinics, if that's the company that you're looking for, I mean, you probably have to go through the CEO, but like, man, Tom was fucking real. He was real. He was honest.
Maybe we can help build a bridge. Maybe we can help build a little
That's
bridge
possible too.
If you were a company that was taking heat for business decisions that undermined equity, what would you do?
So you're asking, that's the thing. You're asking me a question that a lawyer has to answer when it's coming to corporate America. I have nothing to lose, so I'm going to go on with you, Grant, any day, anytime. But obviously anyone else from a corporation who has a lot to lose, whether it's your job or anything, I mean, like, you can lose your company. So no, if I'm them.
I think the insight is that the corporate world works better with propaganda than it does with journalism. And fundamentally, whenever you print something that someone else wants you to print, you're abdicating your duty as a journalist. But when you start talking about or printing things they don't want printed, that's when you've earned your stripes, in my opinion.
Well, unfortunately, I mean, I agree with what you said, but most journalists today are only writing from a single perspective. So I don't know. I mean, everyone right now, there's very little gray in the world. There's very little open-mindedness, Mike, which was what we talked about. There's a lot of closed-mindedness going on right now. But I mean, just to get back to, I think, the major point of this whole thing, and the reason why I wanted to have Rev Clinics on, because the separation between what's happening between corporate cannabis, which I believe has to exist for cannabis, the cannabis industry to grow, and eventually also to become federally legal. I think corporate cannabis has to exist, and any corporation at any level, at that high of a level, is going to be corrupt, right? I mean, you can't we're dealing with technology, we're dealing with oil, and I mean, all this shit. It's a commodity. I mean, cannabis can save this fucking country in a weird fucking way.
That's why we regulate them, though, right? And that's why they don't regulate themselves if our government's functioning correctly.
Government. I mean, that's what lobbyists do, man.
You're dealing with a community who's better at what they do than lobbyists.
We're winning now. Lately, we were behind at first. We definitely. We have some comments too.
Oh yeah, let's go.
Hugh Giordano, who's he works with UFCW. I love Hugh. We have some funny conversations. I love talking to Hugh. Actually, I'm glad I met him this year. He's from New Jersey. He's a Jersey guy, totally nice. Funny guy from Jersey. He says, hopefully both hosts of Super Lemon Haze continue to stay neutral and trustworthy when talking about serious issues in cannabis. Glad they are openly speaking about the Rev Clinics issues. So they seem to be supporting you. Hugh likes you, I guess. Got some new fans.
I think I think Scott and our point has always been, like you said, Mike, and it's just education. I mean, that's my 20 years in the healthcare industry. I'm a public health professional. I've been educating my whole life. I do that today. I've done that when I was born, basically. Scott's in corporate America too. Like the two of us are, and we're not trying to steer this conversation in any direction. I think what we're trying to do is make it work for all of us, because, like Mike, you said this, and I believe this, but like we love cannabis, right? There's no denying that. I mean, so
that's why I was late for the show today.
Exactly.
I fell asleep, woke up, I said I gotta get my 2 joints before the show. Seriously. But
both sides have to exist, and that's the thing. The question is, and this is actually the part of the conversation that I would love to play the most, is that I asked Tom about the gap, and he's like, "No one ever asked me about the gap. Like, what's the gap between?" I mean, and he's speaking specifically about Massachusetts. He's only talking about his company, and obviously the people who are trying to, or the few people, 1 or 2 of them that have been successful at starting a company, the E people. He's like, where's the gap? And he could actually specifically put a point on where the gap was. And that was interesting to me, because the person that high up, and this is the question I have for you guys too, is that if you guys can both identify and potentially agree on where this gap lies, maybe there can be a healthy conversation to bridge that. What
if you go to them and say something like, would you support a social equity loan fund? They're going to think about that and this is true of any company, from the perspective of, does a social equity loan fund that helps our competition come into business without us getting any stake in it at all?
There's no way an EE company is competing with Rev Clinics.
Right. No, and you know what? I think the other part of that, Grant, I'm going to stop you right there. Grant, because I think the other part of that is good business, especially long term. Like, you're thinking,
right? That's
short term, Grant, you're right. It probably doesn't help them. But longer term, when there is competition, people are going to remember the good players versus when you have a choice, when you can shop to 10 places in Boston, a lot of people are going to be like, you know what, I'm going to go to Kobe. I'm going to go to the people I trust.
You can cross-pollinate in the future too, with different marketing and advertising.
Right. Totally. And let me get into, like, again, something that I thought was super interesting. So, Mike, you went up to Haverhill, right? To interview, was it Caroline who opened up the store? You had a great show, 15 minutes. I recommend anyone watching that, because it was quick. It was during my warm up before my run. But you introduced some great guests, and the one thing that I asked you about was in her thank you speech, because obviously she's super pregnant. She works super hard. I don't know if this is like a multiple year thing. I'm sure there's been a lot of stress.
Yeah, she's been getting sued too. She got sued by neighbors. One who during the time he's suing her, right? He gets arrested for assaulting a police officer, drunken, late night visit to his house for a domestic. And so these are the business owners that are right next to her suing her. We did 2 protests of them. And, I'm a wrestler. I'm not afraid, but those guys are intimidating. Yeah. So that's kind of opposition she was facing from her own neighbors.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say, and this is sort of to everyone's point, but so imagine all of that. She's carrying all of that and about to have a baby, right? And she's thanking the first couple people, right? And then I asked Mike, I'm like, she just thanks Sierra Naturals? Did she just thank Rev Clinics? And it made me remember the conversation that Scott and I were having with Tom, but like, that's a logical bridge, because what your answer was when I asked you that question was what? What did you say?
They provided the product for her to sell.
And why was it only them who could provide the product? Because they obtained a monopoly by manipulating the regulatory structure. So yes, it's great that she thanks them, but
Grant,
no, but
do you think she was lying when she said thank you to Rev Clinics?
Sure. No, I'm sure they helped her.
Naturals?
We know they helped her.
I'm sure she was grateful, but this is the insight, and maybe it's a microcosm of my point about this. It's not bad for the industry to value its profits and to value strategic business relationships. I don't think that's bad at all. But the problem is it creates a conflict of interest when talking about public policy. And the reason why it's so dangerous is something like what happened last year, a bill that Mike and I paid very close attention to from the minute it was first proposed, which was H4168. Hannah Kane, the prohibitionist Republican from Shrewsbury, proposed a bill that would have brought the state police and the tax agencies together on this commission to target unlicensed sellers with basically drug war enforcement. And we know that would end up in unequal enforcement and the very same problems that we legalized cannabis to begin with to solve.
To stop arresting
people. Who was the co-sponsor of that legislation? The Commonwealth Dispensary Association. And the reason why I bring that up in this context is that, yes, maybe there are strategic relationships that benefit these businesses. I respect their ability to have them. But what I don't respect is when that mindset becomes toxic to the point where it puts profits above good public policy and profits above the interest of patients. So great, let them help get shops like that open. I support that. But at the same time, if they continue to use their position to advocate for things like H4168, I will 100% continue to call for people to boycott them.
That's right. I mean, I think that it's a carrot and stick approach.
I mean,
they could do the right thing. I want them to do the right thing. I want to have the conversations. I feel better, honestly, about
I don't believe
this week than I did last week. Honestly, just from your conversation, but as well as the conversation I had yesterday with them. So we'll see. I mean, I'm about actions. We'll see what they do. You know, there's a lot they can do.
How about they drop the suit?
Grant, you got to talk to the mic again.
I know. So let me make a point before Grant. Wait, Grant. Let's take a turn.
I don't know. See, you could get me. I could probably work with Rev.
No.
I don't think Grant ever will. Go ahead, Grant.
Oh, sorry.
What are your stances on what's your stances on prohibition in general?
Well, before I say that, let me just say, Rev Clinics, you dropped that suit. Rev Clinics, you dropped that suit against Cambridge, and I will apologize and never say another negative thing about you. So yes, please ask your question.
So Grant's
again.
got a price too. Were you asking about prohibition now?
The answer that Grant gave was basically we're going to boycott all corporate cannabis control.
No.
So
just
what was that? Let me just summarize it.
That do things like 4168.
Hey, I agree with that. I mean, I don't think people, you know, I understand law enforcement and even some prohibition on things because there is some risk from, let's say, the black market cartridges. You know, there's still some risk. You don't know what products you're getting. But to have corporations that are profiting off of legal to be the ones backing it, that's like gross to me. That's like disgusting. It'd be different if it was like, you know, my child lost his lungs and I started this program. You know what I mean? But it's not. It's the corporations asking for it. So that to me, and especially knowing that there's an answer for that. There's they could take out the gray market in 2 seconds. A lot of the gray market, we've been talking about this, Grant and I, we have some proposals to deal with this.
Describe what do you mean by gray market?
It's not legal, but how many busts are there now?
Gray market.
How hard is it to convict somebody? Right. Even if they make the arrest, even if they get 100 plants, like almost every time I talk to the attorneys all the time, like the plants get returned, the charges get dropped. They just string people along for 2 to 3 years. You know, you have to go to court.
So it's the fear tactic, basically?
Yeah. It's, you know, the cops can basically do what they want, but can they get a conviction? You know, most judges are like, we voted for this, and juries, forget it. No jury's going to convict unless it's really, you know, crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But federal is different. They could always go federal charges. Federal, you can still get convictions federally, especially if you have a lot of plants. But state, especially, it's hard for them to convict. But what we're talking about too recently, and this was part of the application process, is how do we reduce that gray market? There's a couple simple ways. Number one, a lot of the gray market we know, because Grant and I talk to a lot of patients, and Grant's one of them. It's people like Grant who are on a disability.
Mm-hmm.
They're making $1,000 less. How do you go to a dispensary and get $100 quarter when your gross is $800 a month?
Mm-hmm.
Your net, you can't afford it. So what are you doing? You're going to the guy on the street who charges you half the price.
Yeah.
And so if they want to get rid of that competition, the first thing I can do is drop the prices and drop the prices just for poor people. Like I'm fine with a millionaire grandpa who wants to pay $100 an eighth. That's fine, or a quarter. That's okay. He's happy. He likes it because, he's got the money. But, some poor person who's disabled, they shouldn't have to go to the street. So that's
or
one
the
way
vets too, right? You brought up that. You had Stephen Mendili right on, right?
Right. And the other way is
Same
they
thing.
could just let more open. Like they should be pushing to have more stores, more. The more of these that we have, the less you're going to have a gray market. I mean, these are much better ways than arresting people. And especially when they arrest, who do they usually get? They get the lowest person on the rung. They get the person who doesn't have anyone to turn in. Even when you get, Pablo Escobar or whoever it is, they always get off because they have someone that they can turn in that's big, right? The little guy never has
given the next guy's name, right?
Right.
And that's why the mindset fundamentally doesn't work. And that's why it's not that I'm just anti-prohibition, because I obviously feel that the prohibitionist mindset is abhorrent, but it's that people who weaponize prohibition to benefit their bottom line, it disgusts me. And I'm not afraid to say it.
I'm with you.
It's just, I guess from this conversation, I could say the one thing that I know could change is a conversation. I know, at least from our perspective. And I think that sliding scale idea for, lower income for vets, I like, and that's why Stephen Mendili, who's on your show, he's going to come on our show actually this week.
Awesome.
To continue just to press that message of, I mean, they have to be on that bill has to pass, right? I mean, they have to be.
Well, no, that's not a sliding scale.
No, that's just have access to have their name so that they're considered eligible to apply for the medical card.
Yep.
But I think that's something that I feel like that's something that we can work on. That's a good one.
Sure. And another great thing that is related to sliding scales, now that you mention it, I'm actually working on a proposal right now for dispensaries that make co-located medical and adult use dispensaries that make more than 50 to 75 million in revenue per year across their locations in the Commonwealth would have to set aside 1 to 2% of their stock for sale to qualified economic or medical hardship patients. And that economic or medical hardship program would be a sliding scale based on income administered by the commission. And what's so great about this is that this is what those medical companies back under the DPH agreed to provide originally, but never
they
did.
Didn't do it. Their hardship programs suck. Like there's a lot of them have lists. They don't give much. It's just not. Some of them don't have anything, and they promised it. You're right. No one kept them.
You have that written up in a doc.
I have a working proposal that some patients came to me and asked me to draft, and on top of that, I got some pushback, funny enough, from some people.
Yeah, we saw
saying,
that on Facebook. Peter Renard.
These companies,
the Mass Patients Advocacy Alliance.
Aren't they the same people?
A few
they're
different
friends
groups,
of them.
A few different groups.
And that doctor who charges $350 an hour.
Well, the same group that opposed the Stephen Mandili's bill, and their argument was that if we did this, it would lead to North Korea-style communism.
Yeah.
And what I said back was, okay, first of all, they agreed to do this originally, right? So you're only asking them to live up to what they originally agreed to. Second of all, it's only for people that make 75 or something more, $1 million or more a year.
Yeah.
And third of all, these medical companies, first of all, they started as nonprofits. Second of all, there's never been equity in their ownership, as we talked about. And third of all, they got to use their medical licenses to monopolize the adult use market. And now when we come to ask for if just companies that make over $50 million a year
Grant,
can provide a mandatory hardship program, they get upset about it.
Grant, because
you deal with this every episode?
Yeah, sometimes I'm on my own.
At least Scott I can manage.
Grant, we have I got some numbers from a source, and I can't reveal yet about how much Netta made last year and the year before. So we're going to have the numbers pretty soon. Like, I'm going to be able to share. What do you think they made last year?
Let's see. How many locations do they have open?
Just each location, or both locations. There's two sales locations.
Brookline's probably got in the hundreds.
I mean, if you're looking at 2019, so you got both
60 million in revenue.
Yeah.
Close. I'm not going to say the number, but yeah, I mean,
and 40 to 50% of that is coming from Brookline.
You know how I got that number, Mike?
How?
I was at the planning board hearing for Rev Clinics, and their CEO had to tell the planning board an estimate of what they thought Netta made per month.
There you go. So we're talking a lot of money. One of the things I came back with Peter at, he said, this will, like you said, this is going to make communism. Once you, force the government to charge different prices to different people, they'll do it to everything. And I'm like, you know what? No, this is different. Like Elizabeth Warren's talking about the same thing for pharmaceuticals. Medicine is different than Netflix. Medicine is different than buying a new computer.
Yes.
This is the only reason this will go in this country, because people I've seen people get sick and die and not have it, or have to go to the guy down the street. It's different. Medicine is different.
The biggest shift that has to happen, Mike, is that people have to understand that this isn't a luxury or just something we do to entertain yourself for a few minutes. Or for a Saturday night. It's not going to a movie.
Right.
That's the whole reason why we're in this mess. I think is because there's just not enough that understand what we're trying to do with the medical or the mental health and piece of this, really.
And just like the insulin issue or the EpiPen issue, we've seen this over and over recently, where one or two people have control over something that affects a lot of people, and they jack up the price.
Mm-hmm.
And so that needs to change. And if the government has to step in on the short term and bring in some of these price controls or whatever we're calling them to lessen the price for people who can't afford it, then I'm definitely supporting it. And I want to make sure, I am not anti-business. I'm a business guy. I own business. I've worked in business my whole life. I like capitalism. I just think that at certain things, like antitrust, I think antitrust is a great thing. It should exist in capitalism. You have to have some regulators. You have to have some rules. Otherwise, everyone's going to rip everyone off, and they're just going to say that's business.
The one thing, and again, this is sort of the public health of me, but I guess us being so young and just getting into this just half a year ago, and I pay attention a lot to language, and I think, Mike, and I got this from one of the earlier podcasts when I started to do some research on my own, but you changed your language and how you spoke about weed. You no longer use the word. Everything's cannabis. That was important, right? And also the other
pushback on that too.
No, I know, but that's you mentioned it even when you're speaking to people from Charlene Title all the way down to the people who are opening up the stores, anyone, to consumers.
You'll still see me slipping weed sometimes.
Yeah, but you've done as a person who is applying to be on this cannabis control commission. I can understand why I think you would be a great candidate, because truthfully, I think you represent. I mean, you're always going to have Grant, and I know Grant, you would have been there, but because of the little restriction on being a Democrat, right? Wasn't that it?
I'm not a Democrat anymore, but I didn't unenroll early enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I think Mike, you're a great candidate for that, because I think the way that you speak to the people, I think it's incredible. And the other thing was just using the word medical. You make every, and again, I know it's purposeful, but it's also from a PR perspective, it's brilliant. You're basically you're changing and reshaping the way that people are talking about weed, which is that's the word that carries the stigma.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I've had to. I use that. I mean, I've switched to Canvas, and a lot of that is listening and reading some of your stuff too, Mike. So yeah, I mean,
you know what? And I'm not going to take the credit for that. You know what I'll take the credit for is having an open mind and listening to experts and people that come on the show. They've affected me. They've changed my opinion on so many things, and I think that's the key: is that we all have to listen to each other and realize our strengths and weaknesses. And like Grant is really good at certain things, like keeping track of every super bill. I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to compete.
I'm going to go back. I'm actually go back. I'm going to look at all those numbers that you say, Grant, see if any of them are wrong, and I'm going to text you right away.
Yeah, you won't find it. Very rarely.
I'm sure. I know I won't.
Yeah, you got to really put some time in. So I think we all just kind of.
His ear, though. He might have someone in his ear. I don't know. Is there a button there?
No, but I will say, you asked if it was always like this. When we touch on topics that have to do with, fair market versus regulated market, or fair market versus captured market, or patient access, I get a little animated, but there are some shows where it's more just,
I know. I've listened
back
to many
and forth.
of them. I'm just giving you shit.
This is his spot.
Yeah. Well, that's passion. To be honest, that's the reason why we're having this conversation.
Get fired about stuff.
It's fucking passion. It's fire. And Mike, that's the reason why I'm glad you mentioned it on your last podcast with Steven, but you and I are going to try to kind of do some stuff, right? We're gonna.
We'll post some of your podcasts.
Yeah, I'm going to send you our shit because, like I said, we'll always. I mean, just different people having the same conversation is going to be completely different, if that makes any sense, right? I mean, even if we're going with the same direction, people are going to hear it differently from different people. So I think it's going to be interesting to see because you just interviewed Steven. We're going to have Steven on Thursday, so it'll be cool to have those episodes back to back to see if it goes in a different direction.
Different angles on approaches and things, yeah.
So I think it's smart.
So we're talking to Eric and Scott for the Super Lemon Haze podcast, which airs on the Kirk Minahan YouTube channel. If you don't know, Kirk Minahan is a very big deal in Boston. You either love him or you hate him. Podcast Jesus, as he's known as, and he really lives up to that
Praise
name.
The Jesus.
He's the king around here. People are afraid of him. Yeah, the Globe, the Red Sox, they're all afraid of Kirk Minahan.
Well,
I am a little bit too. I've always been like, shit, if he really gets mad at me. But I think I'm good now with Kirk. I don't think we're going to have any issues because of you guys. I like you guys so much. I have no reason to get mad at Kirk now. He brought you guys into our lives.
One of the bridges that we've built in our repertoire, yeah.
Everyone, like Mike, I think like you're saying, everyone is opened. You just have to find the keyhole and you have to have the key, right? So I think we can, I'm excited to kind of be on this journey with you guys too, because I know you guys have been at it forever. We're looking forward to helping out any way that we can too. So, let's just keep the conversation open and going. And, if there's questions like Mike, before I even had Tom on, remember I was DMing you. I'm like,
oh yeah.
What do you want me to ask him? Where do you want me to go with this? Because not to say that, Scott and I didn't already have our own conversations to set up the episode because we knew this was going to be big, but I wanted to have your perspective and I wanted to have a little bit of you. Yeah, and
that's what we do a lot too. If we have someone on, we know someone's interested in it, we'll hit them up and say, like, you're the expert on this. What questions do you want asked? And I think that's a big key for anyone trying to do a show today is, find your community, find your experts and listen to them. They know what they're talking about. Nobody is going to know everything about everything.
Right.
Like, I don't know crap about how to fix my car. I go to a mechanic. You know what I mean? I've done some brake jobs, but, that was because I had to. Now I just
and I don't even leave my house.
Yeah. Now I just
who does these days?
Yeah. But I forgot what I was going to say too. I had something nice to say about you guys. I don't even know.
Well, I would just say we were talking about crossover a little bit. We did get some great, just for what it's worth, Mike. We got some good feedback about having you on and kind of building that bridge and kind of reconnect on some of that stuff from the past there too. So good feedback from the fan network and the Minifans as you would have.
I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do next. I can't wait to see your next episode with Stephen Mendili. That's going to be awesome.
All right, guys. Thanks for having us on. Great pleasure to meet you.
Very nice to meet you guys.
Oh, I know. Hopefully. I know. I had one more question before I let you go. I always do.
Go ahead.
You guys just ran in the Kirk.
Wait, you just set the clock for another 30 minutes, Mike.
Yeah,
we don't got 30 minutes.
Because I'm in.
You get one more question. Let's go.
It's about sports, because I like sports. I used to be a big athlete, but since I hurt my back, I really don't do crap, honestly. But I always keep saying I'm going to come back and do like a 5K or something. Joey was doing one. I was going to do, but I never did it. Like I just say I'm going to, because before I got hurt, my goal was to run the marathon, you know? So now I'm like, all right, maybe a 5K. You guys just did something with Kirk Minahan, right? What was that all about? I saw your 420 bib. I was like, that's awesome.
So, it all started as a joke, but basically, it's on the Barstool Network, the Kirk Minahan show. And I think they were just, Kirk and Dave Portnoy, they have a pretty amazing relationship. It's very funny. It's the reason why this relationship works. I don't think Kirk right now would have worked anywhere else except in some sort of private subscription service. Barstool was the right place for him to land. And so I think during one interview back in the day, Kirk predicted Dave Portnoy's death because he was just commenting on, I don't know, his behaviors lately or
just fucking.
Yeah. Like if you saw David Portnoy's post today, go to it. It's so funny. He's basically doing one of those other like super press conferences. I have to say my mind about all the shit that's going down in the world.
He's attacking Goodell now because don't let him come to isn't gonna let him go through with
right. But he looked like true death. So anyway, so the point is that like Kirk predicted his death. It was like the 18th of May, and so they designed a 5K for fun as a memorial.
David Portnoy Memorial Run.
That's what it was called.
Oh my
exactly.
God.
So it was funny.
And
then when they were trying to promote it, they had actually a cameo from Tucker Carlson, who did like an obituary for him.
Black and white photo.
Yeah, it was really funny. Anyway,
but it actually turned into a decent like health and wellness sort of phenomenon that kind of went through the fan population.
Yeah, they had
some steam.
Yeah, had over 1,000 runners. We also was a virtual run, so we all logged into this special app, and then Steve, his producer, was broadcasting a show. So if you had headphones in, you basically listened to all the whole show basically without while you're running, and so it was
cool.
really in PR.
That's something we gotta come up with.
The app.
It crashed the app. It was the most amount of runners ever to do a single race for this company, and it was that's what the Minifans come to play.
Portnoy show up, or did he hide in New York?
No, he did, but he did a video of himself saying, "You motherfuckers, I survived." Fuck you.
He was busy opening packages or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Something stupid in New York or something.
So that was it. Yeah. So we had a goal. So we did it, Mike. So I mean, and the thing is, I'm not a runner, and I've been sort of somewhat posting some of my progress while I was training for that. It was only like 2 months long, whatever. But do it, man. It's just start slow.
You got up there and met Kirk though too, real quick. Got up and got to say hi. Kirk was engaging with the fans and doing his thing.
Oh yeah, the race day.
On race day.
Race day. There was a couple places where some of the Minifans were congregating, and Kirk tweeted out basically.
Was that a fundraiser too? Was that like a charity thing?
No, I think it was one of those things where that was actually. I mean, the Minifans bitch.
It was like a joke, and they just did it and it got big.
Yeah, it was a joke, and then I think there was some potential place that they were going to allocate the money, and they've done this before. I think when Kirk went into treatment, they did a fundraiser for mental health, and they used all the money raised for a special T-shirt to that organization. I think this started out similar to that idea, but it turned out to be complete bullshit, and it was just for profit.
This was a gag. However, what's worth mentioning is the Minifans raise money for folks.
Yeah, I know they do. That's why I asked, because I see them raising money for families.
Yeah.
This one they were fucking around, but but plenty of other times they open up. They look out for each other.
So one of the Minifans was his child was extremely sick, and I know, Mike, you were promoting actually a woman's child who was sick for COVID, right?
That's right.
Was she in the hospital?
A friend of ours.
Yeah, so similar thing happened for one of the Strong Minifans, and they raised like $25,000, and they did it through doing some of these cameos, like that app.
That's right.
Where like you get D- celebrities saying whatever the fuck you want to say. Well, so Kirk, Steve, and Mike all raised like thousands of dollars doing cameos.
I was so close to doing that. I'm like, I'm afraid.
Oh yeah,
I'm afraid. I'm afraid what I'll get out of this.
But the funny thing is that he went through all of them, and he even said that on air. He's like, you know what? I got some fucking weird ones, and I got some ones I probably shouldn't have done, but I did them anyway. And he always said it was because of the cause, the cause. And that's where I think that guy's, he's amazing in that sense. I mean, he's got a fucking chip on his shoulder like no other, but like, in the end of the day, I think he's a pretty decent and nice guy. And I don't know, we get bits and pieces of that, just kind of being a little bit closer to him and listening to him a lot.
I liked I liked when he did the bit. It's not even a bit. It was his real life about when the train track story. I mean, just
Oh,
listen to
man.
that, and I was just
Yeah.
like, wow, this is as real as it gets, and
It is.
and people need to have those conversations, especially men.
Yeah.
You know, and his audience
Totally.
is mostly men. We're the ones who don't want to talk about this stuff, and
Yeah.
so for him to kind of give that a platform makes it okay to talk about, you know, with a lot of men who need to be able to talk about it. So I love him for that.
Mhm.
So there's some things I don't like about his stuff, but whatever, you know, I really like him for that.
Yeah. And you know, his best fans, Mike, are probably the ones that hear it the way that you heard it. And I think that's how we started this whole thing. When he had his last hospitalization and he made that public announcement that he was leaving, and everyone was, you know, the whole community stood up behind him. We were actually away just coincidentally on vacation together, our two families. And we were like by a pool smoking a joint. And we're like, it's time.
We can
Let's do
fill
it.
some of this
Let's
gap.
do this, man. Let's do this. And that's when we proposed the show. We have a video on the deck of that pool, which I'll save forever. And I sent that in to him. It was a 2-minute thing where we were just like, dude, this is what we want to do. And we got back from our trip and they're like, let's do it. So, and then it's the mental health plus the pro cannabis plus the policy, public health. It's all, I don't know.
Part of what you guys do now. Love it.
Yeah.
So we're the Young Jurks. It's Mike and Grant tonight hosting our two friends from the Super Lemon Haze podcast, Scott and Eric and Scott. Good guys. One's a fake doctor that gives better recommendations than my real doctor. Really. I love your recommendations.
That's good to hear,
he'll
Mike.
pick
I
out-
like that.
Grant, if you need some help, he'll pick out a good strain for you.
Happy to, boys. Happy
Oh,
to.
cool.
Anytime, John.
That's a great
Anytime.
service. That's a great service you're running. I think it's a very, very cool idea.
You can find me at the Cannabis Doc One on Twitter. I'll hit you guys up, and of course, I'm already connected to the Jerks account, and I believe to Mike. But yeah, we'll get that out there for sure.
Perfect. And you guys are on Twitter as well under your show tag Super Lemon Haze, right?
So, or actually, it's at Hayes Podcast. I rarely
Hayes
just.
Podcast.
I should
I like
start.
that
I
even
should. Yeah, at Hayes Podcast. So look for that.
Easy.
So,
I
those of you who
follow
are-
everything you guys do now. Go ahead, Grant. Sorry.
good.
I was saying, those of you who are watching, even after we drop off in a second here, once we say goodbye, stay tuned because we have some correspondence potentially coming on live from Boston during the protest. So just letting everyone know. Sorry, Mike.
No, definitely. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of other things happening in the world beyond cannabis, both nationally and in the city of Boston right now. So hopefully we can get some calls and see what's going on.
Yeah. All right. And I wish for peace, please, everyone.
Yes, yes. And I want to thank you guys for coming on again, Eric.
All
and
right,
Scott.
guys.
Thank
Peace.
you very much
All right,
for having us, guys.
We'll be in
Nice
touch.
to
You
meet
too,
guys.
Grant.
We'll talk
Take
soon.
care. Okay. Bye.
I know. What's up, Grant?
Not too much. That was a really nice interview. I enjoyed meeting those guys. Thank you very much, Mike, for
They're
introducing
good
me
guys,
to
aren't
them.
they?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
And I like how they're honest. Like they could have just spun a bunch of BS about why they didn't want to put that out. They came on and told the exact truth. I like it. I like them a lot. I do.
They were very transparent, and that's I thought the whole interview was really embodied in that question. Do you think you can compromise without compromising yourself? And they really, seemed genuine in thinking about that and how they approached it. So I have a lot of respect for them.
I do too. I think they handled everything well. Eric and Scott from the Super Lemon Haze podcast. Check them out on the Kirk Minihane YouTube channel.
What is this?
Is it over?
We're running out of time.
I don't want to hear your excuses! No, it's not fair.
Where'd all the files go?